Hello again, geographers, and today I've got another video for you on Zambia's path to development. So we're going to use this content video to create get our background knowledge on how Zambia has been trying to get socially, economically and environmentally developed. And we're going to look at it with the aim to do an 8-mark question in class on the Millennium Development Goals, which you can see over here. So we're going to get over to that in a moment. I'm going to go straight into it, and we're going to start over here, as we always do in the left-hand corner, with stages of development. And we know that this graph here can also be called a Rostow model. And Rostow said that development, typically thinking about it in terms of going up all the time in a straight line, when it comes to countries like low-income and developing countries, we often see it zigzag. Okay, so the stages of development won't be as simple as this red straight line. As time goes by, instead of going all the way up, sometimes they're going to stagger a little bit, and then they might start to go up again, and then they're going to stagger a little bit again, and then they're going to continue to go up again, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to try and mirror that with a few points about how Zambia has developed over time. So in 1964, so we'll mark that in as the first point of Zambia's timeline here. In 1964, Zambia gained its independence from Britain when it was colonized in the 1800s by Britain. So it is, as it becomes independent, starting to make its way along this line of development. Okay, it's getting more developed, and it's making itself, taking more control of itself. However, you could say that since dependence, it has been a little bit more difficult because of the fact that Europe has continued to maintain some control over Zambia. In 1975, the Kariba Dam was built, and this allowed Zambia to gain a little bit more independence. It was able to generate its own hydroelectric power. So like I said, 1975 here, Kariba Dam. We're able to generate hydroelectric power, and we're able to supplement our economy a little bit. And this was also very important for the copper mining industry. Now, in 1980, we had an outbreak of HIV and AIDS across Africa. And what happened as a result of that was there was a staggering of the development again. It wasn't able to continue developing because the effect on healthcare and the effect on the people's health in the country was quite dramatic. There was problems with death rate, it went up, and you can see that the slowing of Zambia's development is going to occur as a result. Now, we're going to jump to 2000, and in the year 2000, Zambia actually begins to develop again because the price for copper increases. So copper prices go up. So again, it continues to develop because of that improvement in the industry of copper, which Zambia has in abundance. I'll just draw our copper symbols that we've done in class before as well. Copper pipes. We're going to be able to get jobs in the copper industry. We're going to be able to allow people to work in copper mines. We're going to be able to do business with countries outside of Zambia's borders. So it's going to be really important for that, and in terms of helping Zambia to get better, to develop economically and socially. And then another thing that happened so that Zambia has been able to continue to develop was in 2006. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, announced that Zambia would no longer have to pay back any of their debt. So they basically took control of Zambia's debt and said that you are getting debt relief from the IMF. So they were no longer indebted. And that meant that they had a little bit more money left over. The government could supplement them with allowing people to have cheaper access to food, and so on and so forth. So it was really, really good for Zambia's development. And then the last thing that we're going to add in here is that in 2010, Zambia develops new industries, continues to progress economically, and be able to provide for people's health, provide for people's homes, housing, things like that, because we've got things like tourism being developed, we've got improvements in modern farming methods, and we've also got improvements such as the continued generation of a hydroelectric power, but that this is actually supporting things like farming, supporting things like tourism, and supporting things like healthcare. Okay? Right, so we've now got an idea of how Zambia has developed and made progress, but slowed a little bit, such as where copper prices fell, for example, in 1970, or when Europe had more control over them in the 1960s and early 1970s. We've also got a further advancement, such as when they created the Kariba Dam through foreign investment. We've got a slowing in the 1980s from things like the HIV and AIDS virus, and continued progression from rising copper prices, debt relief, and the introduction of new industries that would allow the economy to prosper, to benefit. Okay, so how do we measure this development? We measure it in a lot of different ways, because we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. So let's look at it economically. Economically, we've got 5 years here across 2001 to 2013. So we're going to look at the percentage of growth economically and see how this zigzag pattern actually looks when we think about money. Okay, so you can see here in 2001 the growth percentage was just under 5%, and by 2006 it had grown by over 1%. And if we think about the things that happened between 2001 and 2006, we had the rising copper prices, which suggests that idea of growth. We do have this problem between 2006 and 2008 of Zambia owing money before the IMF comes in and saves them. So that explains that dip in the percentage of growth. But then it grows to its highest amount in those 13 years, actually, to over 7.5%. And that coincides with the IMF relieving them of that debt and saying, you don't owe that money anymore. It dips again then, again probably to do with just the way that economies rise and fall. And again, it will start to increase, we don't, off the chart that we've got here, but reasons for that might be to do with these new industries that were introduced, like farming and tourism. So we can actually see the zigzag pattern, the up and downs of the economic growth. Okay, so that's how we measure these ideas of development. Okay, and if you were given a graph like that, you would suggest these might be the reasons for that, if you were asked to explain why there is a zigzag economic development pattern. Now we're coming over here to the Millennium Development Goals, which will allow us to look at how Zambia has improved a lot of these aspects of the economy and aspects of keeping people healthy and keeping people educated, keeping people in touch with other countries. And we're going to look at these 8 aspects of the Millennium Development Goals. These were introduced in the 2000s, hence the idea of them being called the Millennium Development Goals, and they were for 189 different countries. We've got 8 goals, and we're going to go through them. So first of all, they wanted to introduce global partnership. Okay, I'm not going to write it down, you can get that in your book, but global partnership, making connections between different countries internationally, as well as being supported by different bodies such as the International Monetary Fund, which we mentioned, involvement with China, which we've looked at already. We've got poverty and hunger, and how we can tackle that problem, reducing poverty and hunger for people in Zambia. Education, and improving people being educated and going to primary education and secondary education. We've got gender equality, another huge important thing connected to the idea of Zambia's culture, and the fact that girls typically were not continuing in education because of the cultural differences between boys and girls in Zambia at the time. We've got the idea of child mortality and reducing child mortality. We've got the maternal health of women in Zambia. We've got kind of combating illness and disease, such as the HIV and AIDS virus, and keeping people healthy. And we've got the sustainable environment, in keeping the environment clean, supporting nature, and that would be the eighth one that we'll look at here. Okay, so there's 8 Millennium Development Goals. Go and have a look at them in your textbook, do a bit of research online to find out a little bit more about them, and we're going to have a look at how these goals between 2000 and 2015 were tackled by Zambia and its government and its people. So how did they do with these goals? We're going to have a look at poverty and hunger, and we're going to specifically focus on the idea of poverty. Hunger will go into that idea. So in 1990, poverty was around 60% in Zambia. And the goal was to cut this in half. They didn't achieve this. Okay, they got it down to about 48% by 2010, and they did not cut it in half by 2015. So unfortunately, they did not achieve that goal. However, they did reduce it slightly, and that is a good sign, and that suggests that they have been able to improve the poverty problem. Okay, places like Lusaka benefited from the countries trying to tackle this issue and reduced locally the problem of hunger and poverty for people living in Lusaka, the capital city. So that makes sense because they would have been getting a lot of investment from places like China, and debt relief really would have helped them. We've got primary school education, so we're coming over to these two because they're going to be a little bit linked together. So we're going to have a link symbol there. So primary school percentage of children attending went from, in 1990, being around 75% up to, or around 79%, so between that percentage for 1990, it went to nearly 99% in 2010. And it was expected that by 2015, every child in Zambia, with very few exceptions, would be in primary school education. That is boys and girls. So that is definitely a positive that they got out of these Millennium Development Goals, and it's something we could say, if you were evaluating the Millennium Development Goals in Zambia, this was a success for the people of Zambia and the government. One of the problems with this was that after primary school education, gender equality was still a problem in Zambia, and that girls were typically not going to school in terms of secondary education. They were continuing on to become married at quite an early age, 12 to 15, and they would go home and they would support their husband and their kids that they would go on to have. So this is a problem that the following goals that we're going to mention towards the end of this video would want to achieve after the 2015 end date of the Millennium Development Goals. Now finally, we're going to look at child deaths. We could kind of think about these two things linked in together, but we're mostly going to focus on the idea of child mortality. So children's deaths under the age of 5 from 1,000 healthy births. That means that 1,000 children that were born, all of these children were considered healthy at birth. Under the age of 5 in 1990, 185 of these 1,000 children were dying before the age of 5. That meant that that was quite a high number for these, for the people of Zambia, for the kids of Zambia. That was reduced to around approximately 140 children dying under the age of 5 for every 1,000 healthy children being born. So there was a significant reduction of approximately 45 deaths less in the space of 20 years. And by 2015, it is expected that that number continued to go down. So that's another positive that we can consider to take from Zambia's path of development and the way it has been trying to tackle the 8 Millennium Development Goals. I hope this video has been helpful for you. I do want you to go home and have a look at this and tackle the quiz on Google Classroom that I'm going to put up for homework for this content video that I've done. All of the answers to the quiz will be answerable through the content in this video, and I look forward to seeing how you all get on with that.